Dr. Rachel Cumberbatch is the Director of Regulatory Affairs, Animal Drug Section at the Animal Health Institute, or AHI. AHI represents the manufacturers of animal drugs and veterinary biologics before federal agencies, Congress, and international health and food safety organizations. Dr. Cumberbatch earned a Bachelor of Science in Animal Sciences in 2007 from Purdue University. Dr. Cumberbatch earned her DVM degree in 2011, also from Purdue University. As a veterinary student, she took the mixed animal track. Dr. Cumberbatch began her career as a clinical small animal veterinarian. She transitioned to public policy in 2013 when she was selected as a AAAS Science Policy Fellow at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Office. The following year, she served as an American Veterinary Medical Association AVMA Congressional Fellow supporting Senator Al Franken's healthcare portfolio. During her tenure in the Senate, Dr. Cumberbatch worked to improve public health infrastructure by raising the profile of One Health, the intersection between animal, human, and environmental health. And she personally briefed Senator Al Franken prior to public appearances related to healthcare or animal agriculture. Dr. Cumberbatch's additional training since vet school includes the American Animal Hospital Veterinary Management Institute, Harvard University Risk Communications, and the National Institutes of Health Program Evaluation in 2014. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Rachel Cumberbatch. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
So, can I ask first and foremost, when and why you decided you wanted to be a veterinarian?
When I wanted to be a veterinarian, I have pictures and essays from when I was young that said that I wanted to work with animals, wanted to be a veterinarian. However, once I got into vet school, I considered being an MD and was ultimately just looking for a way to be in medicine, really use my talents, make some money, see the world, and I would say I came full circle, kind of looking at different tracks and ultimately deciding that my 5-year-old self may have been on the right track and maintain that dream of being a veterinarian.
It's so true. So many people have the idea when they're just little kids, and that picture stays pretty constant until they get to vet school. So what was it when you got to vet school and you thought, well, maybe I want to be a human medical doctor instead? Like, why? What happened?
You know, I think ultimately you look at the people that are around you, and I would say that I was looking for people whose life I wanted to emulate in a way. I think oftentimes it's not the job that you're looking for, it's the people who you want to be like. And whose lifestyle you would like to reflect in your own as you're older. And I saw a lot of amazing people. And ultimately, we're all going to have those situations in our lives where we felt helpless, or there's something very, very instrumental to us. And for me, it was taking care of family members. It was seeing people with chronic diseases. You know, it was being in situations where I felt that I wanted to help. And so the question was, what career could I do where I could help people in need? And, you know, for those of us in vet medicine, we understand that that's what we do, helping animals and working in food production. But as a college student, you know, I had to look at all the different routes. Did I want to do human medicine and be right there in the clinics? Did I want to go into business and maybe help support the different medical enterprises? And ultimately, I came back to the fact that I love veterinary medicine. Zoonotic diseases are very important. Food security is very important. And vet medicine offered you a lot of diversity in what you do. And for me, if I can keep as many choices on the table as I can at all times, that made me feel very comfortable. And I think that was what finally got me was, how can I leave my options open? How can I use my talents? How do I think I can start doing exactly what I want to do as quickly as possible? And at the end of the day, vet medicine won out over human medicine. I will say there is one other important aspect of that. I did a lot of informational interviews. And at that time, most of the veterinarians were much happier than the human physicians. And so I asked myself, if in 20 years I look back, maybe I will be, I'll do the profession that seems happier with where they are right now. While I was an undergrad, I volunteered for an organization called the TIMI Foundation, which is now called TIMI Global Health. It is an organization that helps to expand the reach of hospitals in developing countries by doing medical missions outside of their normal jurisdiction and bringing in U.S. doctors and able to have kind of day-long clinics in remote areas of developing countries. And so I helped to lead some of that effort. And that gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of global health doctors and a lot of people who are very passionate about infectious disease. And so there were a number of opportunities to engage with human physicians in a number of different specialties. And that was inspiring. That was very exciting. And I think it gave me an opportunity to really ask a lot of questions that perhaps I didn't get a chance to do initially in rural Wisconsin and rural Indiana, where I grew up.
Interesting. And what you were saying earlier was you ultimately decided on veterinary medicine because it has a greater variety of opportunities, which I agree with. And you said you wanted to get started like quickly. So if you had, because this is figured into my reasoning as well, and that is that you don't have to do an internship and a residency in order to practice as a DVM. Was that right? What you were talking about?
That is. I also have met a number of veterinarians whose career path was intentionally serpentine. They have started in one path and followed their passion into another and had the education and the experience and able to do that. They also had the ability to do it, I would say, financially, and I thought that was very interesting as well. But yes, we don't have to do a residency, which frees us up and gets us going about 4 years earlier. And we are general practitioners, which means we will have the education to weigh the economics, to work across a number of different disciplines. So I didn't have to make that choice of I'm going to work in oncology or internal medicine or surgery. I liked the broadness. I liked general practice. I thought that was very enticing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I like the fact that veterinarians know about all of these things and can do all of these things as a part of their jobs. So yeah, a lot of human medical specialists, they become so super specialized that I don't even think they don't have that broad view of medicine anymore. And they can't go back to practicing in a broad way and doing a variety of different things as easily as we can.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So what did you think of veterinary school? Did you enjoy it? Or not so much? Not everybody does.
I like to say that veterinary school is the best thing I will never do again.
That is a perfect way to put it.
It was 4 years of intense training. I learned a great deal. I survived. It is like athletic conditioning, though. Do you like doing it? No, it was exhausting. But I made very good friends. I learned a great deal. My professors were very committed to teaching, and to this day I will call them if I have questions related to their discipline or general advice on strategies and direction for my career. But vet school's tough, and hard things are hard. And so I think that a number of us have very interesting stories, and as we reflect on it now, we can smile and say that those were 4 very hard years.
Yes, I agree. I love the way you described it. Now, tell me this. We all know that vet school is hard, but what about the transition from veterinary school to being a small animal clinical veterinarian? How was that?
There is, transitions are just by nature, I think, difficult. In some aspects, they were easier. I will say I had very good mentorship because I joined a practice that had a number of different doctors. And I was empathetic with myself to allow me the time to learn and to continue studying. I also was in a practice that allowed me to work 4 days a week with no on-call. And that freed me up to have more free time than I had had for the last 8 years. And so that was a good life balance. But there are aspects of practice that you really cannot be trained in until you are there. Beginning practice is the same as school, where you have a very steep learning curve, and you need to be patient with yourself and expect that to be really hard, and rely on your support group, rely on your grit, and understand that it's going to get easier. But then the next problem happens.
Always.
Sometimes for us type A's, we get bored. And that's a problem. It's either a steep learning curve, or we're beginning to kind of look at what's next.
Oh my God, that's exactly how I feel. It's like one extreme or the other.
Yep.
Boredom or, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Yeah, and so is that what happened? Is that why you decided that you wanted to transition out of clinical practice and into something else? Were you bored? What was your reason for seeking the AAAS fellowship?
Yes. So I currently work in policy. Policy is one where you use your scientific know-how and able to really piece together an argument. But I'm working with people all day long. It is not practicing and not veterinary medicine as you traditionally think about it. And this is what I've always wanted to do. I was introduced to policy very early in my career, and I knew that the impact you can have in this field. And so I went into practice intentionally to learn as much as I can, to really ingrain what I had trained to do, with the knowledge that someday I was going to pivot. And it was after about 2.5 years that I made that decision to try to do that. And I did that through a fellowship called the AAAS Fellowship that allowed me to get some training in policy. But this was the plan. This is where I wanted to be. This is how I wanted to use my veterinary degree. And it was after a few years that I thought that it was okay for me to make that transition. But I did think it was important to practice, and I don't regret that decision at all.
Right. So you always knew that you wanted a couple years of practice under your belt, just for the perspective that it would give you later.
I did, exactly.
Yeah.
If you're going to practice right out of school. You have all that information in your mind. It's the right time to use it. There are a lot of lessons you didn't even know that you did not yet master that practice will give you. There is something very rewarding about helping a client and an animal with a problem that you can fix that day. You are not going to get those kind of wins in policy.
Oh.
We work in high level discussions, and working in policy takes years to really get to a finish line. And I think that practice was very helpful in that sense, that it ingrained the medicine and really helped to connect you to the patients. And that is a good thing and a bad thing. You had to see things work well and what happens when a good medical plan can come together. But I think those bad days were as impactful and as important of what happens when you don't have the tools, when you have an unmet medical need, when you have mortality and you have increased illness in patients. Those are important to being well-rounded. And I think that's what practice gave me.
Yeah, well said. Now, you talk about difficulty in terms of policy, in that it takes years before you actually get to see the results. And so you did 2 different fellowships back to back. The first was with the EPA. The second was with Senator Al Franken. And leaving after a year, did you have a sense of you didn't get to see things through? Is that what happened, or was there anything that you got to see through at the end of those years?
Depending on your project, you can see through short-term projects, Sometimes you can launch an initiative. But when you are working on big health efforts, you will hit your goals, but at the same time, see a project continue on. These are very high level issues, and they're going to take years. So yes, I got to complete a number of goals, but the projects that I was working on and what I did continues today, even though my fellowship has ended.
Right.
And then, the Hill work, Capitol Hill. I did the AVMA Congressional Fellowship. There is a great deal to see, depending on where you are in the political cycle. And I was there during a presidential election year, which was the election of Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump. And life on the Hill is going to be very different depending on where you are in that cycle. I worked on a number of bills that were introduced and ultimately not passed into law. There were a number of emergencies that came up that I would have never anticipated. The Zika virus outbreak was one of those during my tenure. And I also was there to help introduce legislation that did get passed into law. And so to watch those processes, to be there, certainly that's a learning experience. But, I always keep in mind that there was a great deal I did not see as well. But the good thing is on either of those, you gain a very strong network. And so you have to rely on your colleagues. You constantly have to ask questions. And things change here so quickly that what I knew to be true 1 to 2 years ago likely is not necessarily how it is today. So constant learning.
Right. Now, I want to clarify something because I had another VMA AAAS fellow on the podcast by the name of Dr. Matt Holland, and
yes.
He described he went through the AVMA to get the fellowship. And he said that he's applying for a second fellowship that's going to be strictly AAAS.
Yes.
And it sounds like, did you start with AAAS?
You can do those in either order, which is why Dr. Holland and myself have slightly different paths. But remember, my goal was always humans. It was looking for how to improve the lives of people and very, very much respecting the role of the animals. And when I was looking at this, my thought was that I was going to end on the Hill, that I would stay in Capitol Hill for a number of years. And so I used the AAAS fellowship to pivot from animal health to human health, understanding how difficult it was going to be to convince those on Capitol Hill that a veterinarian should be given responsibility of a human health policy portfolio.
That is something I wanted to ask you about. It's precisely that. So first of all, you were briefing Al Franken on human healthcare issues, right? And animal agriculture issues. Yeah,
exactly. Which is an exciting day. That's a good job when you get that much diversity. I am amazingly impressed by how much a Senate office or a congressional office can do with a limited amount of staff. So you do the best you can with the resources you can. And when I had an opportunity to work for Senator Franken, I worked with amazing staff. But I was the only veterinarian in the room. And so when an animal question came in, I was their natural go-to person. But Senator Franken and his staff trusted me to also work on the human health portfolio. That's where I wanted to be. That's how I wanted to grow. And so they worked side by side with me on that particular portfolio. And it was just like we talked about, a learning curve, but what veterinarians have is a very good understanding of the foundational science. Mm-hmm. We know how to break down these complex topics. Mm-hmm. You can soap a policy issue just like you do a case. I do it very often and brief it much the same way. And so that is how I was able to kind of work in both human health and animal health. It was out of necessity, but there was also a great amount of trust in that office as well, and I'm incredibly grateful to that.
Now, you mentioned sort of having to persuade people that a veterinarian could be responsible for human healthcare issues, and like how did you go about persuading people? Because I remember before going, to veterinary school, or when I was younger, I didn't know that physiology between humans and animals was so similar, that anatomy was so similar. We have the same bones, we have the same organs. Like, I didn't know that. And I remember when I started practicing and people would ask me, oh, dogs have urinary bladders? So you just take for granted, I think, after you get through veterinary school, that of course everybody knows that these things are very similar, but people don't know that. So tell me about how you met that challenge.
And it can be difficult, and you need to approach it with a lot of patience, because you will be giving a very similar answer many times. And so I approached this with an understanding that ultimately they were going to go to bat for their constituents. And so I was there to tell them that I will partner with them in that effort. You come to them with understanding, you come to them offering to help. And then once they know that you can be trusted and that you will be committed, then you can tell them what you know and how you're the right person. But you have to lead with that trust and show that you understand that issue as much as you can to their issue specifically, rather than just very high level. How is this impacting, for Senator Franken, Minnesota versus how it's impacting the rest of the country? And then you can explain, well, veterinarians have the foundational science. We also are clinicians. I have used opioids. I have treated patients. And then you also have to be humble and understand that sometimes you will not be the best messenger. But what I can do is talk doctor to doctor with a physician, or I can talk with a nurse, or I can work with a dentist, and I can help you understand who within the medical field might be the best person to champion this message that you have. But also, I am here to help you on what you are working with. And I think when I had that approach, it went better. But I will admit that there are times that I still don't succeed in making this case, and that sometimes they still do not understand what veterinarians can bring to the table, or even how veterinarians working on animals are also very important for protecting human health. And those can be two different discussions, but certainly that is a conversation I have very often. And we'll continue to have that conversation very often, I am sure, for years to come.
Yeah. Wow. Now, Dr. Holland described to me the initial process of hooking up, like with the fellows matching with the different offices. And it was sort of like a big party, and everybody would meet and talk together. So it sounds like you knew exactly what you wanted to work on. Did you know that you wanted to work with Senator Al Franken? And so did you research some of the political issues regarding human health care before you even went to this hookup party?
Yes. So it's a great way for him to describe it. Yes, it's kind of speed dating. You're right. It is a little bit like speed dating. I was very set that I wanted to work on a human health portfolio. So I did research the topics that were going to be on the table, or that I thought were going to be on the table. I was well briefed on opioids. I definitely knew some of the public health policies that they would be discussing. My way of getting ready was to read the press briefings that different offices that they would put out. And I also looked through the committees, which committees actually handled the topics that I wanted to discuss. And so really focused in on those offices.
Working on healthcare when you were working on issues related to healthcare, I mean, politically, based on the political climate, right? That must have just been like, whoa, right? Very, very passionate ideas on both sides of the fence.
It is. There is no lack of emotion. People are very passionate. People are very opinionated. But these are their lives. These are their children. These are their families. I get it. I will say it was as true when I was on Capitol Hill talking with folks as it is when I was in the exam room. I will cry. There are just stories that are heart-wrenching, and you want to help and you want to solve problems. That's why we became doctors. And there are some situations that are very difficult, where you still feel helpless, and you try very, very hard not to feel hopeless. But it is amazing, but it is emotion first. You are right. You know, it is passion first, and then you will get into the science. The science is a much more comfortable spot. We are comfortable there. But I think where it's important to stay, though, is to recognize how important this is and the emotion that goes along with it.
That is really interesting that you brought that up. That is not something that I ever would have imagined. Like, I thought clinical practice is when you're confronting a lot of difficult emotions. I never would have expected that, you know, as a fellow working in a senator's office on human healthcare, that you would be confronting such emotional issues. But I mean, I suppose it's obvious now that you say it, but that's really interesting. So you're still confronting a lot of difficult emotions, and yeah.
Yep, always. But again, you know, when students ask me, should I practice before doing policy? These are some of the situations why my answer is yes. You know, you want to have stood there and worked on this as an important part of that medical team. I pull on that often. I may pull on my soft skills that I improved during practice as much as I pull on my medical skills, and really lean on those. But it does not get easier. I will tell you that. It can drive you and you can expect it more. But a hard day is a hard day.
Well, let me just, if you don't mind, let's go back in time just a little bit, because I wanted to ask you about the AAH Veterinary Management Institute.
Yes.
What is that? You took that, it's like a management course. You took that after you graduated or when you were a fourth year student?
Yeah, so that is the AHA Veterinary Management Institute. It is done right now through Purdue University in coordination with the Krannert School of Management, which is Purdue's business school. The course is a four-part course, and it is a way for veterinary managers, veterinarians, practice owners, to improve their skills of business ownership. And, you know, I took this as a way to understand the practice, how you run that business. And it will really kind of work you through the HR aspects, strategic planning, financial management. And I thought that was really helpful to have done. It was a great opportunity for me and a unique experience for someone in veterinary school to do. And I think because it was through Purdue and because they were committed to helping me kind of forge this non-traditional career path, they did help me pursue this opportunity as a student. But one of the things I think that helped me get a good step up when I was transitioning from veterinary school to practice was a good understanding about what the owners and what the managers, what they were thinking about.
Wow.
Day-to-day basis. And I would like to think that made me a better associate.
I'm sure.
It definitely made me more patient with my bosses.
Wow, how interesting. I had never heard of this. Now, is this something that usually clinicians take? Is it unique for a student to participate in it? And can anybody, like, how do you sign up for this course?
Yes, anyone can take it. The main audience is for those in management positions in the veterinary industry. So it tends to be clinicians who are practice owners or are leading in some capacity within their clinic. There's a large number of veterinary kind of management folks, which could be veterinary technicians, but it could be someone with a business background who does not have a clinical scope to their day-to-day activities. It is good. That's complemented too with the Veterinary Business Management Association. I hope VBMA is still very active in schools. It certainly was when I was there. And that was a way to also take some business courses and to start to look at this. Because I will say, when I was interviewing for jobs, it is, I think, I was a better candidate because I understood the business aspect. Absolutely. Because I could say to them, yes, I understand that I should be producing 5 times, what you're paying me and able to really make this work. I understand I need to hit my numbers. I understand why turning a profit is important so that we can do very strong medicine. And that put, I think, owners at ease. And then they were more willing to invest time and money into me to make me a strong veterinarian.
Right. Wow. Well, I'm going to look up the AHA Veterinary Management Institute and try to put a link in the show notes, because that just sounds like an invaluable resource. I had never heard of it. So thank you. And then another, you've done a number of trainings. So what is the Harvard Risk Communications program that you did in 2014?
Harvard, along with a number of universities, have courses for professionals on communication, and this one was specific to explaining risk. But what I was trying to learn is, in situations that have negative consequences, but that we don't have all the information yet, what is the best way to communicate that to people, to give us time to learn more, but ultimately to provide them the information that they know without creating hysteria.
Fascinating. And also, I bet it's really good at teaching you how to set expectations appropriately.
Yes. It is. It's also good media training.
So do you think that's a course that future clinicians could benefit from, or no? Because the way I'm hearing it sounds like...
Well, clinicians absolutely need to talk about risk communication. We do that on a daily basis. I think clinicians also should be taking negotiation courses, because at the end of the day, you're going to be in that office talking to owners, and you're going to need to convince them this is why I believe what I believe. Let's understand your values too, to get to this decision. We don't just need courses in medicine. Mm-hmm. Yes, we need to keep up to date, but I think we need more. And this is a message I would gladly give to state organizations as well when they are looking at what CE they will accept as part of your continuing education for your license. You need well-rounded clinicians. And this communication training, negotiation training, and business training, I think is just as important as our medical training.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't know that, I think there's more now, but for instance, the risk communications course that you took, did that qualify for veterinary CE? My guess is not.
Nope, it did not. And in cases like that, I will rely heavily on local conferences, certainly, free CE. I do like the VetGirl app and able to do CE via webinars when I am able to. You will also notice, looking through kind of my CV, I gravitate towards trainings that will expand my network as well, which means I don't just want to do trainings with veterinarians. Right. If I have an opportunity to cross-train with physicians and with dentists, with nurses, I will do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn from the business community. There's a great deal to learn, honestly, from those in religious studies and philosophy as well. And so if there's an opportunity to do that, I really enjoy doing it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So I imagine the the NIH Program Evaluation, that was a great cross-training experience for you. Did you get to work with a lot of different kinds of people?
So working with National Institutes of Health, it's going to be very heavy on the PhDs. Some of them might have clinical degrees as well, but these are folks, doing some of the greatest scientific research. And at NIH, that was a course in the truest sense, where I went multiple times a week to the NIH campus to learn about program evaluation. Because we set out a lot of plans, whether it's in veterinary medicine and human medicine, and I was very curious about how we could go about evaluating if what we are doing is working, if it's worth it, is it a good use of money,
yes.
Is it a good use of time, and can we be doing things better?
Yes.
That was my reason for that training.
Fascinating. Yeah, so can you give some examples about what kind of programs you would be evaluating? Or one would be evaluating? Just to clarify for listeners.
I think that many of us probably grew up with DARE. Say no to drugs.
Right.
Top young students.
Yes.
And what the evaluators came to find out is that introducing youth to this information on narcotics and illegal substances actually increased the number of people who were experimenting with these substances.
Oh my gosh.
But I've never known that if you did not evaluate and really look at the program. That is fascinating. We also have different policies and different programs that we put on in veterinary medicine. Are breed-specific policies working? There are places that have put this in. Evaluate it. That's going to help you make better decisions in the future.
Right.
And so these are the reasons that I was wanting to understand better how you would evaluate a program. But like everything, I learned, and then I found out how much I didn't know as well. And program evaluation, there are people that do focus entirely on how you evaluate public health programs.
But what a great foundation. And I love this because, like we were talking about earlier, there is so much emotion involved in policy.
Yes.
And that emotion can actually cause you to make the wrong decisions for the right reasons. And I think that happens all the time, is we're making the wrong decisions with the best intentions because we're too emotional about it and we're not looking at objective data. Does this work? Is this really the best way to accomplish our objectives? How can we do it better?
Exactly.
So now tell me a little bit more about, you mentioned that when you were a fellow with Al Franken, you worked on the One Health Initiative. Can you explain what the One Health Initiative is and what a veterinarian's role could be in that? Because everybody's talking about One Health now. Not everybody seems to understand exactly what it is. And a lot of people will say, oh, if you're a veterinarian, there's lots of opportunities in One Health, but I'm not sure exactly what those opportunities are. Could you talk about that?
Right. One Health at its core is a concept. It's a principle. It is the understanding that enable for any of us to be healthy, that the environment, animals, and people have to be at their optimal health. And in its truest sense, this is all pieces equal. So it is working across these lines, making sure that veterinarians and producers and human physicians are at the table together to really kind of talk this out and explain how you manage health in these different animals. So are there opportunities? Yes, they are. There are many, but you are not going to see job postings for veterinarians necessarily in One Health efforts. But again, we are problem solvers. You have to look for what the need is and figure out, do you have the talents that can help them? And if the answer is yes, then go for it. I don't care if it asks for a veterinarian or not.
Interesting. Now, when you say you're not going to see job postings for veterinarians for One Health initiatives, Like, is there a One Health Initiative's job posting board? Like, what are these jobs? Where do you look at them? How do you find them?
So there are a number of organizations that work on One Health. There's the One Health Commission. There is a number of programs now at universities under the One Health umbrella. Certainly you can look there. But I would also look at the Department of Health in your state. You can look at the OIE. You can look at any of the government websites where they may have people at the table. That includes the CDC, that includes USDA, that includes EPA. And we forget defense fairly often, but certainly they are a microcosm all their own. And so they are very invested in One Health as well. And these are all places that you can look. But you need to be creative and look outside and really figure out where is the need in this space? Can I help? And then look at job postings widely, and keep your ears open.
That is really interesting. I love that. It's not just like step A, step B, step C, blah, it's really, like you said, it's being creative.
Very much so. If you want to work in One Health, creativity is an absolute must.
Wow. All right. Now, so tell me, after your fellowship, your second fellowship finished, was it just an immediate transition to Animal Health Institute, or how did you get the job at AHI?
Well, so we mentioned previous, when I was on Capitol Hill, it was an election year. And so when I finished the fellowship, folks were right in the middle of the presidential campaign, which means there wasn't much hiring happening in the Senate offices. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen. And I ultimately reached out to a contact that I had met previously to say, what are you seeing in the industry right now? And they had to say, not much, but I heard that someone from AHI may be leaving. We don't think this is necessarily what you're looking for, but we've heard a position it might be available. And so I sent a resume and a letter in, and I got an email back saying, you are overqualified for this. And I said, okay, how about you meet me? And we talk about, what's going on, and then we can go from there.
I love it.
And a couple weeks later, we had that interview, and I got a call back saying, we will find a place. This is the need that we have here, but we think the sky's the limit. So if you are willing to help us and to do some of these activities that we need help with, we think that we can find a place for you here. And so again, creative.
Wow.
It is networking, but it is some talent. It is certainly some courage to kind of take that step, and it is finding a team that will work with you too. So there has to be a great amount of appreciation at the end of the day for people taking a risk on you.
I love that. What chutzpah, like they were just like, no, you're really overqualified for this position, so not really. And you were like, well, why don't you meet me? And let's talk. That is so great.
The worst that was going to happen. You just say, it was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you. One of the best things that I have heard about networking, that's kind of my mantra is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But it's not necessarily who you know, it's who knows you as well. And so going into an interview and making a good impression is never a failed hour. It is good to be known, and that's given me bravery to have some conversations where I didn't necessarily know exactly how this would come about, but was curious enough to meet new people.
Right. So, basically, you were going in there and you were just having a conversation with people. What's going on? What are your needs? And right. So finding out about them and then saying, you know what, actually, I could help you with that.
Exactly.
That is so great. I love it. So basically you just sort of, came in and then you guys co-created the position that you're in now.
Well, I came in as a manager. And so the role there is to work with experts within AHI's member companies, and able to coordinate what we call working groups, so efforts that they are undertaking, and then helping to keep everyone organized. I will say it also had a benefit that I got to learn who was in the company, how the organization worked, and then could help build. And I was later promoted to director, which is greater responsibility for helping to craft the policies, the language, and the strategies that the organization uses to advance our goals. But it was very helpful to have that foundational kind of experience as well. I'm fine writing minutes. I can do that, absolutely. And that really helped me to forge some relationships with experts within the member companies.
It's so interesting, because people will look at your resume. Well, not your resume, but people will look at a resume and be like, this is a XYZ, and this XYZ fits in this box.
Exactly.
And what you really need to do in a lot of ways is say, hey, I don't fit in that box. I can fit in lots of different boxes.
Yep. And ultimately, it is, you want to be an organization that you like where they're going, who is doing some really cool things, because the chair you're sitting in can change. The culture of the organization, its mission doesn't change as much. And so focus on that more than the role. But getting your foot in the door, I think, is really important.
Oh, I love that advice. Now, so tell me what you're doing now. What's your current position? What are your responsibilities? What's a typical day, if there is a typical day for you?
Yeah. So I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs for animal drugs at the Animal Health Institute. The Animal Health Institute is the trade organization for the animal health companies. So those that make the medicines and the vaccines and your flea and tick medicine that you give to your pet, and that we use on the farm. This is now working with the manufacturers that provided the tools I used day in and day out when I was in practice. So I had that connection with the membership as well. My job is to be the liaison between the animal health industry and the U.S. government. And I will work very closely with those that are regulating the industry. So for drugs, that's the FDA, Center for Veterinary Medicine. For the flea and tick, it is the EPA. And you had an opportunity to talk with my colleague, Will McCulley, who works with the USDA. Those are the vaccines, the veterinary biologics.
Right.
And on a day-to-day basis, I have the opportunity to work on very important high-level issues, whether it be trade, whether it be the process we use to submit information of new drugs, the new applications that they're putting in. It may also be working on new legislation for Capitol Hill and helping to make sure that how we explain a concept to Hill staff is medically accurate. And there are also aspects that you don't expect and are always a surprise on a given day, which makes things very exciting. But I will say, what I know is going to happen in my day is I will get to work with people who are at animal health companies around the country. I will be able to help consolidate and look for patterns and what they're telling me they're experiencing. And able to help figure out how can we make this better? How can we make this more efficient? How can we reduce some of the burden of administrative kind of monotony that needs to go on a day-to-day basis? I will do a great deal of writing. I will do a great deal of talking with people. And at the end of the day, we will be able to put out advice to government officials, to animal owners, to Hill staff about how we can improve the animal health industry. And to me, that's a pretty fun day. like the process.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of variety. And you just must get exposed to so many different things going on a really high level.
You do.
Tell me about your work-life balance now. And you mentioned that when you were a clinical practitioner, you had a pretty good work-life balance. You were only working 4 days a week. But I mean, how does it compare now? What's your life like outside of work?
Outside of work, I have weekends off. I have no on-call. I will say that, in policy, we certainly are continuously watching how things unfold. So work right now is about 50 hours a week in the office. Certainly, I will spend some time learning and reading and trying to keep up to speed on things. I spend a fair amount of time networking as well. And I am trying as best as I can to be attentive and to be present in no matter what I'm doing. And that is not always easy. I very much like what I do. I think that I could probably be dialed in even more than I am, but it is important, and I try to make it an effort to turn the work mind off when I am at home.
Do you have any specific words of advice for people who are thinking that they want to become veterinarians?
So if you want to become a veterinarian, when the idea comes to you at first, write down why, because it is not an easy road, and you really need to be committed to that. It's gonna help with your grit. I would say if you want to be a veterinarian, you have to become financially literate. And I would say, I want you to put that in front of all else. You need to learn how to manage money before you start on this path. I am debt free. I cranked through my debt as fast as I possibly could. That was my goal. And so I put that plan down on paper. And that, I think, has made a lot of difference in my satisfaction with this career that some of my other colleagues have not been as fortunate to do. The other thing that if you want to become a veterinarian, I want you to look big. I don't want you to limit yourself to things. You don't know what you don't know yet, and it's going to be a very fun and very wide open field. And I want you to take advantage of every opportunity that you can get. And I also don't want you to sacrifice your childhood and your undergrad thinking that vet school is only going to be achieved in one way. If you want to study business. If you want to be an engineer, be an engineer. We need wise and well-rounded doctors, and there's not one pathway to do that. And so for those people who are fulfilled and really have had some adventures and really kind of gone out and pursued their passions, even if it didn't seem like what all the other pre-vet students are doing, ultimately are the ones that seem happier. And so don't limit yourself. Stick to your goal, but don't be rigid in your pathway. I think those are my main things.
Wonderful advice. Yeah. And actually, I think people who go out and have other lives and other careers and other experiences, they seem to have a little bit of a boost in terms of their chances of getting accepted into vet school. I mean, vet schools are looking for that diversity.
Yeah, they're looking for that diversity, but you came into this for a reason. You came here to do a job. You came here to help with a need. And so I think that's ultimately what we want to do.
Wonderful. Now, I have to ask you, though, I would really like to get more specifics about this financial literacy thing, because I don't consider myself financially literate. I don't even know what that means. What did you do to make yourself financially literate? How much debt did you have when you graduated? And how did you become debt-free? Because you graduated the same year that I did.
It was
2011. So
financial literacy. Understanding that you are not going to spend more than you have was ingrained into us pretty strong. That being said, I will carve out time to look at where I am financially. I write down every transaction that goes on that credit card so that I understand where my money is going. I also set goals for how much I'm going to save, and that saving goes away first. I will say, though, the best thing that I did was come out of undergrad debt-free. I did not have undergrad debt. And then I went to a state school. So that helps. I need to be honest about it. That, that is going to be a smaller debt load than what other people have. I came out with $68,000 in educational debt from my veterinary degree. I wrote scholarships until I got that last diploma. And so whether it's $2,000 at a time, whether it's $200 at a time, write case studies, sign up for those scholarships. Do not stop doing that at all. This is money earned, and it is going to be helpful. The other thing that I did was to make sure that I paid off as much of my debt as I could very early on. Because remember, that compounding interest is going to hurt you badly.
It's a killer. Yes.
So the more that you can get rid of it early, the better off you're going to be. I invested in my Roth IRA, so my 5,500, the entire time, but a good 40% of my income for a while was going towards that debt. I wanted to get my debt gone in 5 years. I didn't make it. It took me about 6.5, but it was always priority number one. I also would ask financial advice wherever possible. I am not ashamed to let people look at my budget plan to see how much I am making and what my plan is. And so I have asked my parents for advice. I asked, other veterinarians for advice. Some people will say it is better to invest in your retirement than to to crank away at that debt load. But for me, it caused more emotional stress to have it than I thought I would be earning in the market. And so some advice I take and some of it I don't, but I at least recognize it. And that is ultimately how I did that. I lived with roommates. Yes, I was a doctor, but at the same time, I still had the ability to live like I was in college. So my first job, I did come out of school making mid 70s and then in the 90s, and I had a rent that was $600 a month. Those are the ways that allowed me to spend 40% of my income on kind of getting rid of that.
Wow. But worth it, because you are just free now. That just must be incredible.
It is a feeling of freedom. And what you start doing the first 5 years, come to find out you're not going to go away from that. I am still very frugal. I still watch every dollar I spend. Am I making more money than I was when I first came out? Of course I am. But the philosophy is no different. And I don't want veterinarians to be okay being in debt. And, we're not going to be healthy forever. We have a very physically demanding job. Do not get used to this. And so as much as you can do, I think would be very good.
That is great. Fantastic advice. And you're not just earning your money to get through this month or this year. You're earning money so that when you can no longer work, you still have money.
And the goal is financial freedom. So I love my job, but when I'm 60, I want to be working because I want to and not because I have to. If I want to go down to part-time at some point and travel the world or to pick up more nonprofit work, I want to be able to do that.
What an inspiring story. I love it. Do you have a favorite charity that you want to mention?
Yeah, the one that I do the most work with and I would probably champion is 4-H. That's really kind of the biggest one for me. If we're talking about debt, that organization also helped pay for a couple years of school. And so it's one of the other reasons I really encourage kids to do it.
4-H helped pay for school? What is this about?
They are, so 4-H is connected to extension offices within states, particularly agriculture states, which means that local organizations and state organizations provide small but substantial scholarships to folks who have been involved in the organization.
I did not know this.
It's these little pieces of chunking away with educational debt. I like to joke I had a full ride $2,000 at a time.
Oh my gosh!
And so an organization like that, those are the ones that I continue to help fund, just because they do make a big impact.
Right. And 4-H, I mean, that animal experience is something that goes on your application for vet school too.
It does. Yep. Well, it can. Not everyone in 4-H does an animal project, but you can do it. And so that was helpful. But mainly it helps with some of those soft skills. It's certainly nice if you have speaking experience before you get to college.
Okay. All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend and are able to focus completely on your non-job life.
I'll do my best.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.